After being reborn, I placed the divorce agreement in front of Andrew Carter. He didn't even look at it, tossing it aside. The custody of our son? I'm not giving it to you. I don't want custody, I replied calmly. Andrew raised his eyebrows, clearly puzzled. Finally figured it out. Huh, fine. Take care of this mess yourself. I'm not doing homework. No matter what you say, it won't happen. 8-year-old Ethan Carter sprawled on the floor, throwing a tantrum, his expression daring me to try and force him. This had become a daily routine. I told him he had to finish his homework before playing, limited his TV time to 30 minutes, and only allowed him to eat fried chicken and burgers once a week. I set strict rules, hoping to help him develop good habits. But the day Sarah Lee appeared, everything I'd worked for turned into a joke. Ethan glared at me, accusing. Aunt Sarah never makes me do homework. She only takes me out to play. She also lets me eat drumsticks whenever I want. She says boys need to eat a lot to grow tall. He stared at me with disdain. I don't like you at all. I wish Aunt Sarah could be my mom. In my past life, his words shattered me, but I chose to forgive him. I thought he was just too young to understand. I believed that as he grew older, he would come to see how much I cared for him. I continued pushing him to study hard, exercise, and maintain a healthy diet. When he grew up, he graduated from a prestigious university, founded his own company, and married someone from a well-matched family. At his wedding, when the host asked him to thank his parents, he turned to me in front of all the guests and said, "I hope you can let my dad and Aunt Sarah be together. Aunt Sarah has done so much for our family. She deserves happiness." Below the stage, Sarah Lee cried her heart out, as if all the hardship she had endured over the years had finally paid off. Meanwhile, I stood on stage, feeling utterly unnecessary and ridiculous. "Mom, you've been forcing me to do things I didn't want to do since I was a kid. If it weren't for Aunt Sarah quietly giving me warmth and encouragement, I would have been ruined long ago. You and Dad haven't been a real couple for years. Why hold on to this position and make everyone miserable?" I don't remember how I stumbled out of Ethan's wedding in a daze. All I know is that after leaving the hotel, I ran a red light and was hit by a car. That's how I died. But then, I was reborn, looking at my mischievous son throwing another tantrum. I nodded and said, "All right, no homework." Ethan froze, staring at me in disbelief. "Are you serious?" "Of course," I replied calmly. "Then can I keep watching TV?" he asked hesitantly. "Not only can you watch TV, but you can also play on the tablet," I said. "What about eating chips while I play?" Ethan pushed further. "Do as you like." Ethan looked at me in astonishment. "Why are you suddenly being so nice to me?" I smiled faintly but didn't answer. A thankless little wolf like him wasn't worth my genuine care. "Are you scared I'll like Aunt Sarah more than you?" Ethan asked smugly. "I'll give you whatever you want," I said firmly, enunciating each word. "Even your beloved Aunt Sarah." Indulging Ethan's every whim made him even more unruly. He started playing on the tablet the moment he got home from school, brought it to the dinner table, and even hugged it to sleep. If he stayed up too late and couldn't wake up the next morning, I didn't bother waking him. I let him sleep in and decide whether or not to go to school. I stocked the house with all his favorite snacks. The housekeeper couldn't stand it any longer and kindly tried to warn me. "Ma'am, spoiling Master Ethan like this will ruin him." "How could that be?" I replied sarcastically. "Forcing him to do things he doesn't like. That's what would ruin him." But this lifestyle didn't last long before Ethan's behavior started causing trouble at school. His teacher called me, saying, Ethan openly defied his teacher in class, saying, "My parents don't care what I do, so why should you?" I replied coldly, "Sorry, I really can't control him. If there's an issue, contact his father." I gave the teacher Andrew's number and hung up before continuing with my spa treatment. When I returned home after my appointment, I found Andrew Carter, who rarely came home, standing in the living room. His expression was dark, and his voice dripped with sarcasm. "Emily, your tactics just keep getting better. Using our son to get me to come back. Brilliant." I did want Andrew Carter to come back. After all, calling him directly never worked. I couldn't even remember when our relationship had turned so hostile. We had fallen in love freely, gotten married willingly, and supported each other through thick and thin. Together, we had built our company from the ground up. Once the business stabilized, I stepped back to focus on our family, dedicating myself to raising our son and managing the household. I poured so much of my energy into Ethan that I failed to notice something was wrong with Andrew, until it was too late. By the time I realized, he was already emotionally cheating with an intern at the company, Sarah Lee. She was 20, young, vibrant, and irresistibly charming. I accidentally stumbled upon their messages. Andrew had written to her, "You remind me of my wife when she was young. Back then, she was just as sweet and lovely as you are." Sarah replied, "And now?" She followed up with a cute, curious emoji. Andrew responded, "Now, she's old and dull. Sometimes, even being intimate with her feels tiresome." I hadn't expected to see myself in Andrew's eyes in such a humiliating light. That discovery shattered my self-esteem, and I confronted him in a fit of rage. I felt deeply insulted, and I demanded a divorce. Andrew refused. He dismissed his actions, saying he was just joking around with a young girl, and told me not to blow things out of proportion. Both of our families got involved, urging me to reconsider. "Your child is only 2 years old," they said. "Think about Ethan. Don't make such a big deal out of this." Andrew promised he wouldn't contact Sarah again, and even fired her on the spot to prove his loyalty to me. That time, he hadn't physically crossed the line with her, so I chose to forgive him. I even started reflecting on whether I had been too focused on Ethan, neglecting both Andrew and myself. I tried to change, to reconnect with him, but just as I began to adjust, Andrew physically cheated. I received photos from Sarah Lee of her in bed with Andrew. It happened on the very night I was at the hospital, taking care of Ethan, who was running a high fever. When his fever spiked, I rushed him to the ER and called Andrew, desperately hoping he would come. Instead, Andrew snapped over the phone, "Enough, Emily. I'm just out for business networking. Stop making up excuses to force me home." I stayed at the hospital by myself, worrying over Ethan all night. Then, in the dead of night, Sarah sent me the photos. They were explicit, along with the images. She messaged, "Andrew says your dieting makes you look awful. You're not as soft and cute as I am." In that moment, I realized there was no difference between emotional and physical cheating. Cheating was cheating, and Andrew had crossed every line. I filed for divorce again, and this time, Andrew didn't refuse. However, he insisted that Ethan's custody would remain with him. At that point, Ethan was my whole world. He was only 3 years old, utterly attached to me. Without me, he would cry all night and refuse to sleep. I couldn't bear to leave him. I considered taking the fight to court to win custody, but I had been out of work for years and stood no chance against Andrew's resources and influence. Our marriage dragged on in this endless tug of war. He refused to relinquish custody, and I refused to give Ethan up. Over time, as Ethan grew older, I found myself resigned to this broken, miserable marriage. Sometimes, habits can be terrifying. I hated Andrew's infidelity, yet I spent more than half my life with him. But fate granted me a second chance. I opened the drawer, calmly took out the divorce agreement, and handed it to Andrew. When he saw the papers, he laughed mockingly. "Emily, I thought you'd finally come to your senses. You've been quiet for so long, and now you're starting this nonsense again. What more do you want?" Andrew Carter demanded. "Is the money I give you every month not enough? If it's not, tell me how much you want." "Half of the company's assets," I replied without hesitation. Andrew's face turned livid. "Are you out of your mind, Emily? Half? Have you gone insane? The company was built by both of us. It's marital property. I spoke to a lawyer, and half of it is rightfully mine." Andrew scoffed impatiently. "And then what? Unless we divorce, it's still marital property." "Well, isn't that what I'm trying to do right now?" I gestured toward the divorce papers in front of him. He sneered, tossing the agreement aside carelessly. "The custody of our son? I won't give it to you. I don't want it," I said calmly. Andrew's eyebrows shot up, clearly caught off guard. "You finally figured it out? Fine. Then." He picked up the divorce agreement again, his impatience evident. and started to read through it carefully. Besides what was rightfully mine, I didn't demand a single penny more. I had also willingly given up custody of Ethan to him. Andrew frowned deeply, putting the papers down. Emily, you'd better not regret this. Giving up custody means you can't see Ethan without my permission. Not once. And let me make this clear. Once this divorce is finalized, there's no going back. Even if it's for Ethan, I won't reconcile with you. Just sign it, I said, not wanting to waste any more time on pointless arguments. If it weren't for the fact that he was so hard to track down, the first thing I'd have done after being reborn would have been to divorce him. Seeing my unwavering attitude, Andrew signed his name with a flourish. Emily, you brought this on yourself. If you hadn't been so insistent, if you had just focused on our years of shared memories and cared for Ethan like I asked, I would have let you remain Mrs. Carter for life. But you never knew how to cherish what you had. Who would want that? I replied indifferently. In my past life, the only reason I stayed in this marriage wasn't for the title of Mrs. Carter. It was purely because of my bond with Ethan. Andrew threw the signed agreement at me. Pack your things and get out of my house. I already have, I said coolly. I had packed my bags long before this conversation, just waiting for the divorce to be finalized. As I turned to go upstairs, Ethan came into view. He had been hiding in a corner, eavesdropping on our conversation. He had just returned from school with Andrew after being sent home to reflect for 2 days by his teacher. Seeing me leave, Ethan hurried after me. Are you really divorcing, Dad? Shouldn't you be happy about it? I said lightly as I carried my suitcase. From now on, no one will control you. You can do whatever you want. Aren't you afraid that after divorcing Dad, no one will want you? Ethan asked bluntly. Who told you that no one would want me? I asked, amused. Grandma and Dad said so, he answered matter-of-factly. They said you're not good enough for Dad. And after the divorce, no one will take you in. That's why you don't dare to divorce him. I laughed softly, more at the absurdity of it all than at his words. I had long since seen through Andrew, but I hadn't expected his mother to be the same. She always pretended to be kind, criticizing Andrew in front of me and saying how hard it must have been for me to raise Ethan. But behind my back, she clearly only saw me as a free babysitter for her grandson. None of it mattered anymore. These were all people who would soon have no relevance to my life. Ethan followed up. If you promise not to interfere with me, Dad, or Aunt Sarah anymore, I'll help you plead with Dad so he won't divorce you. That won't be necessary, I said, patting his head gently. Take good care of yourself in the future. After all, his growth would have nothing to do with me anymore. I dragged my 2 large suitcases out of the house without looking back. I moved into a fully furnished apartment near a university, a place I had found ahead of time. I planned to take the graduate school entrance exams and start rebuilding my life. Andrew and I had been college classmates, but I had given up my dreams to support his entrepreneurial ambitions. I gave up my eligibility for graduate school to support Andrew Carter in his entrepreneurial journey. After we succeeded and had our son, I shifted my focus entirely to our family. But deep down, I always regretted not pursuing a master's or doctoral degree. Now that I had been given a second chance, I truly understood that people must live for themselves. No one else will ever fully understand your struggles or sacrifices. The day after I moved out of the villa, I saw a post on Sarah Lee's social media. Back when we first met, it was at the company's anniversary celebration. Andrew had invited me to attend with him. Sarah complimented my earrings and eagerly asked to add me on social media to get the link to buy them. Later, she got herself a pair of the same earrings, but they weren't purchased by her. Andrew had given them to her. Today, her post read, "My limited imagination couldn't comprehend it. Such a huge backyard. And it's used for playing soccer." She attached a photo of the backyard of Andrew's villa. It was clear her intention was to announce to the world that she was now openly with Andrew. No longer a mistress hiding in the shadows. I gave her post a quick like. Trash belongs with trash, I thought, smirking to myself. Moments later, Sarah messaged me directly. Emily, I hope you don't mind my post. It was Andrew's idea. He said I've endured so much over the years, and it's time to make it up to me. Sarah often tried to provoke me. She'd send photos of her being affectionate with Andrew or post gushing declarations about how much he loved her. Then, right before I could respond, she'd delete them in feigned innocence with a message. Oops. Wrong person. In the past, her antics had indeed driven me to the brink of insanity. I'd argue endlessly with Andrew, but it only made things worse. He stopped coming home altogether, and even on Ethan's birthdays, he would take Ethan to celebrate with Sarah instead. Every time Ethan returned, he'd say, "Aunt Sarah is so kind to me. She's gentle and beautiful. I want her to be my mom." Looking back, I still don't understand how I endured it all in my previous life. But the deeper the hurt, the less attachment I felt now. I replied to Sarah's message with a smile. Why would I mind? I even liked your post. Isn't that enough proof? You're just trying to show off to Andrew, I added. Sarah seemed convinced that my divorce with Andrew was nothing more than a tantrum. I didn't want to waste any more energy on her. Just as I was about to block her, she sent another message. There's something you forgot to pack. Impossible. I had checked meticulously before leaving. She quickly followed up with a photo. A box of condoms. I calmly replied, keep them. They've expired. Sarah sent a laughing emoji, then added, a few years and you still hadn't used them all? Andrew goes through several with me every day. We can't even restock fast enough. Perfect. I don't need trash. But if you like recycling, that's great. Consider it waste management. I remained unervingly calm. Who are you calling trash? Sarah snapped. Furious. I could see her typing furiously, but I blocked her before she could finish. Out of sight. Out of mind. With Sarah muted from my life, my social media feed felt much cleaner. Free from distractions. I focused all my energy on preparing for my graduate school exams. A month later, I was interrupted by a sudden phone call from Andrew. Emily, where have you been hiding? He demanded angrily. If you don't want a divorce, stop pretending. It was only then that I remembered. Today was the last day of the mandatory divorce cooling off period. We were supposed to go to the civil affairs office to finalize everything. I'm on my way, I said, hanging up immediately. Not wasting a second, I stepped on the gas and drove straight to the civil affairs office. When I arrived, Andrew was standing there, his face twisted into a mocking smile. When we had initially signed the divorce agreement, we'd agreed to meet at 10 a.m. sharp. It was now noon, and the office staff had already left for their lunch break. Andrew sneered. Emily, back when you begged me to sign the divorce papers. I told you already. There's no point regretting it now. What are you trying to pull today? This divorce is happening no matter what. Andrew Carter said coldly. I nodded and replied without hesitation. Of course. I should thank you. Actually, if you hadn't made room for someone else, I wouldn't have realized how good Sarah Lee is at taking care of kids. When you were in charge of Ethan, the house was chaos. But since Sarah came along, Ethan has been as obedient as ever. Andrew smirked, clearly enjoying his own boasting. Well, congratulations on finding yourself such a capable wife, I said sarcastically, still acting tough. Huh, Andrew sneered. Let's see how long you can keep it up. The moment I received the divorce certificate, I let out a long sigh of relief. I had been genuinely worried that my delay earlier might have tested Andrew's patience. But thankfully, he signed without further drama. As soon as I had the certificate, I turned and walked away, unwilling to waste another second on him. Emily, Andrew called after me loudly as I walked briskly toward my car. From now on, we have nothing to do with each other. If you regret this, don't even bother. I didn't wait to hear the rest. I drove away without a second thought, determined not to let his voice occupy even a fragment of my mind. After regaining my freedom, I felt more motivated than ever. Aside from studying tirelessly for my graduate school entrance exams, I also started exercising regularly. I refused to let my body deteriorate the way it had in my previous life. Half a year later, after relentless effort, I finally achieved my goal and was accepted into graduate school. During that time, Ethan called me once. His voice was hesitant. Mom, do you ever think about me? I answered honestly, no, I've been really busy. Today's my 9th birthday, he said, sounding slightly dejected. Happy birthday, I replied with a smile. Don't you want to spend it with me? He asked. Hopeful. Your dad told me I can't see you without his permission. I reminded him calmly. Can't you ask him? Ethan's voice grew agitated. I can't. I said simply. Why do you have to keep fighting with Dad? He's already said. I have important things to do. I interrupted and hung up the phone. That was something I never would have done in the past. Back then, I would cling to the phone, waiting for Ethan to hang up first. See, there's nothing you can't let go of, as long as you're disappointed enough. One late night during my graduate studies, I received an unexpected call from Andrew. I hadn't blocked his number, mainly because I assumed he would never have a reason to contact me. And for over a year since our divorce, he had been the perfect ex, so absent it was as if he no longer existed. I was half asleep when I answered. Hello, Emily. I'm not giving you another chance. Andrew's icy voice came through the line. Huh. I mumbled, confused. Was he out of his mind? Sarah's pregnant with my child. I'm marrying her, he announced proudly. Congratulations. I replied, more out of politeness than genuine interest, though being woken up at midnight was certainly annoying. Andrew let out a cold laugh before hanging up abruptly. I didn't think much of it until I received their wedding invitation. For a moment, I thought it had been sent to me by mistake. But there it was, my full name printed clearly on the card. Of course, just because they invited me didn't mean I was obligated to attend. I tossed the invitation into the trash without hesitation. On the day of the wedding, Ethan called me. Mom, why aren't you here yet? He asked. Where? I asked, not immediately realizing what he was talking about. Dad and Aunt Sarah's wedding at the hotel, he said, his voice trembling. I never said I was coming, I replied. But Dad sent you an invitation. I even came early to save you a seat. Why won't you come? Ethan's voice cracked, on the verge of tears. I felt no emotion as I responded calmly. I have other things to do. Thank you for saving me a seat. But give it to someone else. Is whatever you're doing more important than me? Ethan cried, his voice filled with frustration. I thought for a moment and answered honestly. Yes, it's more important than you. You mean nothing to me anymore, I said bluntly after refusing my son's plea. Not long after, Andrew called. Emily, you're upset about me marrying Sarah, so now you're taking it out on Ethan? How childish can you be? What are you talking about? I asked, confused. Don't play dumb. What did you say to Ethan just now? He's been crying non-stop. Andrew accused. I didn't say anything to him. I explained. Stop lying. You can't handle me marrying Sarah, so you're venting your anger on our son. That moment, I felt utterly speechless. Just admit it. Andrew pressed. But it's too late now. Regretting it won't change a thing. I wish you and Sarah a happy marriage, I said before hanging up. After ending the call, I blocked Andrew as well. I thought that once he married Sarah, there would be no more intersections between our lives. But less than a month later, Andrew unexpectedly showed up outside the gates of a university. I had just finished work in the lab and was leaving campus with my senior colleague, Jason Shin. We were discussing lab data as we walked, only to see Andrew waiting at the entrance with Ethan. How did he even know I was studying here? The moment Andrew saw me, his gaze shifted to Jason beside me. For a split second, I thought I saw anger in his eyes, though it might have been my imagination. Andrew's voice was dripping with sarcasm. Now I see why you don't want your son anymore. Got yourself a new man. Huh, Emily, does he even know you're divorced and have a child? Before I could respond, Jason stepped in. I heard her ex-husband's a total scumbag. Do you know him? I couldn't help but laugh, and Andrew's face darkened instantly. I need to speak with Emily, Andrew said coldly, implying Jason should leave. Jason ignored him and turned to me. Is there a problem here? No, I said with a smile. You can head back. I'll handle this. All right, call me if you need help. I'll notify campus security. Thanks, I replied, watching Jason leave. Once he was out of sight, Andrew sneered. So reluctant to part, aren't you? I shifted my gaze to him and asked directly. What do you want? Andrew scoffed. Blocking me. Is that supposed to be funny? I don't see the point of keeping people in my contacts when they don't matter anymore. I said calmly. Are you seriously abandoning your son too? Andrew shot back. I glanced at Ethan, who was staring at me with tearful eyes. I smiled faintly. He's the one who doesn't want me. I'm just respecting his choice. I never said I don't want you. Ethan cried. I want to be with you forever. I walked over to Ethan and noticed he'd gained some weight. Smiling, I said, didn't you tell me yourself that you wanted Sarah to be your mom? Well, now she is. Shouldn't you be happy? Ethan's eyes reddened, and he bit his lip, clearly uncomfortable. Andrew finally dropped the pretense. Sarah's pregnant. She's dealing with pregnancy-related mood swings and gets agitated easily. The doctor said she needs a quiet environment. So Ethan has to stay with you for now. I'm very busy, I said, frowning. My lab workload is heavy, and I'm also preparing for my PhD entrance exams. I don't have time to look after him. Andrew's tone turned sharp. Are you saying your stupid degree is more important than your son? At your age, what's the point? How much money can you even make with it? Haven't I already given you enough in the settlement to last a lifetime? Stop pretending to be noble. I took a deep breath, trying to remain composed. Andrew, in all the years we were together, did I ever wrong you? What's that supposed to mean? He snapped, his temper flaring. I never did anything to betray you. I dedicated myself to you, to Ethan, and to our family. After we divorced, you insisted on taking custody, and Ethan himself said he preferred Sarah. I let go of everything for you. Now that I'm living my own life, what right do you have to question my choices? When did I say you were wrong? Andrew shot back. Then why are you criticizing me for pursuing my education? Why should I sacrifice for Ethan when you're the one who wanted custody? Why should it always be me making sacrifices? Andrew's expression darkened. Isn't this a critical time for Ethan? Can't you set aside your ambitions for him? Even just a little? I laughed coldly. Why does it always have to be me? When we graduated college, you asked me to give up my graduate studies to start a business with you. When the business succeeded, and we had Ethan, you asked me to give up my career to focus on the family. Then, after the divorce, I did exactly as you wanted. I said with a hint of irony, sacrificing custody of my son. And now, you've started a new family, don't want to care for your son, and expect me to sacrifice myself again to fulfill your happiness? Andrew, don't you think you're being shameless? I never said I didn't want Ethan. Andrew retorted, his voice rising. I only said that while Sarah's pregnant, you could help take care of him temporarily. I'll even double the child support payments. His defensive tone revealed that my words had struck a nerve. He grew increasingly agitated. What if Sarah develops postpartum depression? And if that turns into chronic fatigue syndrome or something worse? There are so many conditions she could face. You can't expect me to handle this alone. Oh, I see, I said with mock sincerity. So there's always a new excuse waiting, isn't there? Sarah's not like that. Andrew snapped. She treats Ethan like her own. Then why is Ethan such a problem for her while she's pregnant? Isn't that contradictory? I countered, my tone laced with sarcasm. Andrew fell silent, his expression hardening. Ethan, standing beside him, suddenly looked up at me, his voice trembling. Mom, do you really not want me anymore? At 10 years old. He was old enough to understand the conversation. I crouched down to meet his gaze and gently replied, of course not. But now that Aunt Sarah is your new mom, I feel reassured. In the past, I had always played the bad guy, enforcing strict rules and pushing him to excel in his studies. Now that I had no expectations of him, I vowed never to speak harshly to him again. But Ethan wasn't satisfied. Mom, stop smiling at me like that. It makes me feel like you don't love me anymore. I stroked his head softly. How could I not love you? I just don't want to force you to do things you don't like anymore. I don't want to ruin your future. Enough, Emily. Andrew interrupted, clearly annoyed by my calm demeanor. His pride was wounded. After all these years, he had never been at a disadvantage in arguments with me. Pulling Ethan by the arm, he prepared to leave, throwing one last threat over his shoulder. If you won't take care of Ethan, I won't beg you anymore. But don't expect him to acknowledge you as his mom again. I shrugged indifferently. That's fine. No matter what I do. He'll grow up loving Aunt Sarah more than me. Why should I waste my energy? As they walked away, I turned my focus back to my life. Each day was exhausting but fulfilling, and I felt a sense of accomplishment I had never known before. Taking care of myself made everything better. Still, peace was occasionally disrupted. One day, after completing a set of lab experiments, I noticed my phone had several missed calls from an unknown number. When I returned the call, it was Andrew on the other end. Emily, come to the hospital. Ethan's been in an accident and is injured. I hesitated but decided to go. No matter what, Ethan was still my biological son, and responsibility remained. When I arrived at the hospital and approached the door to Ethan's room, I overheard a heated argument inside. Andrew, how much longer are you going to keep your son here? Sarah's shrill voice echoed through the room. If you don't send him away, I'll end up dying because of him. Me and the baby both. I've told you, Ethan doesn't have a problem with you. Why do you keep picking on him? He fell down the stairs and broke his bone. You didn't even care. Andrew yelled back, equally furious. So you want me to fall down the stairs next? Is that it? Or maybe you're waiting for me to die, so you'll have an excuse to get back together with Emily. Then your perfect little family can reunite. Sarah's voice was full of venom. Enough. Sarah, Andrew shouted. Stop being so unreasonable. Ethan needs rest to heal. Fine. I'll show you what unreasonable looks like. Sarah snapped. Her tone turned icy. Either you get rid of him, or I'll take this baby and jump. Your choice. He's only 10. Where is he supposed to go? Andrew's voice trembled with anger. I don't care. Sarah screamed. I just don't want to see him anymore. If you don't send him away, you'll have 2 lives on your conscience. The room went silent. Moments later, the door burst open, and Sarah stormed out, only to stop short when she saw me standing there. Her expression froze, and for a moment, she seemed genuinely caught off guard. I was momentarily stunned when I saw Sarah Lee. Was this really the same young, delicate woman she used to be? Her heavily pregnant figure made her look like an older expectant mother. It had only been 2 years since I last saw her. Emily, what are you doing here? Sarah snapped, her temper flaring as though she were ready to explode at anyone she encountered. I heard Ethan was hospitalized, so I came to check on him. I said calmly, Are you here to see Ethan or Andrew? Sarah sneered. What? Are you trying to seduce Andrew while I'm pregnant? Is that it? Was she insane? Her paranoia didn't surprise me, though, even though I hadn't seen her in 2 years. I had heard from mutual friends about her antics. Apparently, ever since she found out she was having a son, she had turned increasingly erratic. Anytime there was a remotely attractive female employee at Andrew's company, Sarah would accuse her of seducing Andrew and force her to resign. She wouldn't allow Andrew to attend business dinners, and if he did, she'd storm into the event and cause a scene, costing Andrew multiple major deals. People said Andrew was being driven mad by her behavior. Back then, I found it amusing. Wasn't Andrew the one who adored her liveliness? Get out. Andrew suddenly stormed out of the hospital room, roaring at Sarah. His anger was so intense, it looked like he might devour her. Sarah, startled by Andrew's rare display of fury, took a step back but quickly regained her composure. She puffed out her chest, clearly emboldened by her pregnancy. If you ever dare do anything to betray me, I'll end it all, she screamed. And you'd better deal with your son. If not, I'll take the baby inside me and jump off a building. Your choice. Ethan is only 10. Where would he go? Andrew's voice trembled with rage. I don't care. I just don't want to see him anymore. If you don't send him away, you'll have 2 lives on your conscience, Sarah declared before storming out. As she exited the room, she ran into me. The moment she saw me, she froze, her expression betraying a flicker of shock. It seemed she hadn't expected me to overhear everything. Andrew, noticing the encounter, asked, Is this funny to you? I quickly wiped the small smirk off my face. What happens between you two has nothing to do with me, I said indifferently. I'm just here to see Ethan. Andrew didn't respond, and I walked into the room. Ethan lay on the hospital bed, his eyes red and swollen. likely from crying. When he saw me, his eyes lit up, and he called out excitedly, "Mom!" I nodded at him, my tone reserved. I simply asked about his condition. Ethan explained that after school, he ran into Sarah on the stairs. He claimed she deliberately pushed him. However, Sarah insisted that Ethan had tried to push her down the stairs, saying he didn't want her to have another child to steal his father's affection. She claimed she acted in self-defense and accidentally pushed Ethan. Ethan continued, tearfully admitting, "She's so mean to me. Mom, she was only pretending to be nice before. Ever since she married Dad, she's been hitting me and calling me a wild child without a mother. She forces me to eat fried chicken and burgers and says I only deserve junk food." The more he spoke, the harder he cried. I listened, maintaining a calm demeanor. "Ethan," I said gently but firmly, "this is something you need to discuss with your dad or your grandma. I'm not the right person for this. They don't believe me. They only care about the baby. They don't care about me at all. Mom, they don't love me. Please, let me come with you," Ethan pleaded, gripping my hand tightly. "I'll be good from now on. I'll listen to you and never say bad things about you again. Please, forgive me. I was wrong. I'm sorry," Ethan cried uncontrollably, his fear of abandonment palpable. But I had truly let him go. Gently pushing his hand away, I replied, "Ethan, everyone has to live with the choices they make. When you chose Aunt Sarah, I stepped out of your world. I regret it. I was wrong," he cried, his voice breaking. "Then change yourself. Ethan, don't try to change me," I said firmly. "My life won't change for anyone, especially not for you or Andrew." With that, I walked out of Ethan's hospital room, my expression cold and resolute. Forgiveness was not an option, and it never would be. "Emily, when did you become so heartless?" Andrew stood at the doorway, glaring at me. "Ethan is your biological son. How can you abandon him like this? Don't you feel guilty?" I stopped and turned to him, my tone steady and calm. "First of all, I've fulfilled my responsibilities as a mother. I haven't abandoned him. Second, Ethan is also your biological son, and you have custody. It's your job to provide him with a stable living environment. Lastly, our marriage ended because of your infidelity. You have no right to accuse me of failing Ethan. If anyone is to blame, it's you." Andrew's face flushed with embarrassment, and he stood there speechless for a moment. Gathering his courage, he finally asked, "Emily, do you just want me to admit defeat? Is that it?" I frowned in confusion. "What are you talking about?" Andrew's voice grew bitter. "You want me to apologize? To say I regret divorcing you and marrying Sarah? Fine, I'll say it. I was wrong. I shouldn't have let Sarah ruin our relationship. I shouldn't have destroyed our marriage. I shouldn't have divorced you." His tone was remorseful, but there was still an undeniable air of arrogance in his confession. He said, "I'll promise you this. After Sarah gives birth and the law allows, I'll divorce her immediately and remarry you." I stayed silent, utterly stunned by Andrew's words. I couldn't believe the sheer audacity of this man. How shameless he had to be to say such things with such confidence. Andrew continued, "I know you've been single these past 2 years. You've been advancing your education, working out, keeping yourself in shape. All of it just to make me notice, to make me regret what I did. You really think I've been living my life just to impress you?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Emily, we're not young anymore. There's no need to play these games. Just take the opportunity while it's still good. My patience isn't unlimited," Andrew said, clearly trying to sound magnanimous. He didn't even give me a chance to respond before he continued. "I have a large apartment ready. You and Ethan can move there for now. Once I've divorced Sarah, I'll bring you both back to the villa." I didn't say anything, just smiled at him. Andrew's temper flared. "What are you laughing at?" "I'm laughing at how shameless someone can be," I replied. Andrew's face twisted in anger. "Emily, don't push your luck. I'm only giving you this chance because of Ethan. That's a wonderful opportunity," I said mockingly. "Save it for someone else. I couldn't care less." "Stop being so difficult." Andrew's frustration boiled over. "Do you really think, as a divorced woman in her 30s with a 10-year-old son, any man would actually want you? They're just playing around. None of them would marry you." And yet you got remarried. I shot back sarcastically. Men and women aren't the same. Andrew sneered. A man can turn over a new leaf. But a woman. That was the root of it all, wasn't it? His belief that as a man, he could do whatever he wanted without consequences. It was what had fueled his arrogance and repeated betrayals during our marriage. You don't need to worry about me, I said coldly. Even if I end up alone for the rest of my life, I would never consider you again. Andrew's face turned red with humiliation, and I left without looking back. I couldn't understand how someone could still hold on to such archaic, patriarchal beliefs in this day and age. In my past life, I must have been out of my mind to tolerate him for so long. After that unpleasant encounter, Andrew stopped bothering me. I successfully continued my studies and stayed on at the university to pursue a doctorate, fully immersing myself in the academic world I loved. One day, I reluctantly agreed to attend a college reunion at the insistence of my old roommate. She assured me Andrew wouldn't be there, given all the chaos in his life. During the dinner, one of our classmates couldn't help but gossip. Did you hear? Andrew Carter was nearly ruined by his second wife. The classmate glanced at me cautiously and added, Emily, you don't mind us talking about your ex-husband, do you? You said it yourself. He's my ex. Why would I care? I replied with a smile. Reassured, the classmate leaned in conspiratorially. That woman is a real piece of work. She causes trouble everywhere she goes. She forbids Andrew from having attractive female employees at his company and crashes his business dinners to make a scene. She's driven his company to the brink of collapse. Another classmate chimed in. I heard she's trying to kick his eldest son out of the house to make way for her own kid. But that's not even the craziest part, the first classmate said dramatically, making everyone lean in closer. What's crazier than that? Someone asked eagerly. Their newborn son isn't even Andrew's biological child. What? The table erupted in shock. How did they find out? Another classmate pressed. When the baby was born, they ran a blood test. The kid's blood type is O. But Andrew's is AB. It's impossible for him to have an O-type child. Andrew must have been furious. That's like waving a huge green flag right in his face, someone exclaimed, referring to the metaphorical green hat of infidelity. Apparently, he almost killed her. Now they're going through a divorce, and she's planning to extort him for a huge settlement because of the abuse. The first classmate concluded with a shake of their head. Everyone at the table burst into animated discussion, but I just sipped my drink and stayed quiet. Andrew's life was no longer my concern. I listened to the gossip quietly, and I couldn't deny it was somewhat satisfying. My roommate, standing beside me with a mischievous smile, nudged me. Hearing all this gossip, aren't you glad you came? I nodded. It does put me in a good mood. But just as the reunion was about to end, something unexpected happened. Andrew Carter suddenly showed up. After a whole evening of talking about him, seeing him in person made everyone a little uncomfortable. Is it over already? Andrew asked nonchalantly, showing no hint of embarrassment. Yes, it's finished. The class leader replied quickly, visibly flustered. Sorry, I got held up and came late, Andrew said, looking unapologetic. No problem. Maybe next time, the class leader said curtly, and to everyone's relief. He didn't suggest prolonging the gathering for Andrew's sake. One by one, our classmates left, and I waited by the roadside for a cab since I'd had a few drinks. I'll give you a ride, Andrew said, rolling down his car window. No thanks, I replied, turning him down flatly. Come on, it's on my way. He insisted. Really? No need, I said firmly. Andrew sighed, got out of his car, and walked over. Ignoring him, I acted as though he wasn't there. You've probably heard by now about what Sarah did to me, he began, clearly fishing for sympathy. I just heard, I said, not bothering to hide my amusement. It really was funny. I finalized my divorce from Sarah today, Andrew said, his gaze fixed on me. I didn't respond. It wasn't my concern, and I had no interest in it. It's my fault for not showing enough sincerity before, Andrew continued, his tone softening. Honestly, I've regretted it for a long time but couldn't bring myself to ask for forgiveness. I looked at him, finding the situation absurd. And now? Have you suddenly found the courage because no one else wants you? Emily, I admit some of my words in the past were out of line. But I never meant to hurt you. Andrew said with a sigh. I just didn't know how to bring you back to me. So I tried reverse psychology. Well, thanks to your little strategy, you've only made me despise you more. I said bluntly. Andrew's face turned red with embarrassment and frustration. Emily, I'm sorry. I truly know I was wrong. I swear I'll never do anything to hurt you again. Let's start over. Me, you, and Ethan. We can be a family again. A family? I scoffed. How do you even have the audacity to say that? Come home with me, Andrew said, reaching out to grab my arm, but I smoothly dodged him. He looked awkward but persisted. Ethan's been waiting for us at home. He's missed you these past years and regrets the things he said to you. It's not just him. I regret everything too. Can't you forgive us just this once? No, I said firmly, leaving no room for argument. Emily, why can't you forgive us? Is it not enough that we regret it? Andrew asked, his tone desperate. Why should I forgive you just because you regret it? I countered coldly. What about all the pain I endured? What about the lessons I learned, paid for with years of my life? Andrew seemed confused by my words, but I didn't bother to explain. From the moment we divorced, everything between us was over. Stop wasting your time coming to me, and don't use Ethan as a bargaining chip. It won't work. In fact, it only makes me find you more annoying because you're disrupting my life. Are you worried I won't truly change? Andrew asked, seemingly trying to empathize. It has nothing to do with me, I replied. I understand your concerns. I'll prove to you that I've changed, Andrew said, as if trying to convince himself. I couldn't have been clearer. I will never reconcile with you, I said, my patience wearing thin. But you've stayed single this whole time, Andrew pressed, convinced that my single status was a sign I was waiting for him to change. I didn't have the energy to argue anymore. Andrew's confidence was exhausting. He truly believed that all he had to do was turn back, and I'd still be standing there, waiting for him. Let him think what he wants. One day, he'll realize I've long since moved on, so far away that he'll never catch up, let alone be worthy of me. 6 months later, a university held its centennial celebration, inviting alumni from all generations to attend. The campus buzzed with excitement, and as one of the university's distinguished graduates, I was invited to give a speech in the grand auditorium. The hall was packed with people, and among them, I spotted Andrew Carter sitting in the crowd. He probably couldn't believe I was standing on such a dazzling stage, giving a speech that carried so much weight. Behind me, the large screen displayed all of my academic achievements over the years, accomplishments significant enough to earn me a permanent place in the university's century-old Hall of Fame. As my speech concluded, thunderous applause erupted from the audience. I even heard someone shout, "She's amazing!" Smiling, I bowed graciously and stepped off the stage. As I strolled through the campus, several students approached me, asking for photos and autographs. It took some time to politely decline and disperse the crowd, but once I was free, I saw Andrew Carter standing in front of me with Ethan by his side. Ethan had grown noticeably taller since I last saw him. "Mom!" Ethan exclaimed excitedly. "I just watched your speech in the auditorium. I'm so proud of you. Everyone was saying how amazing you are." I gave him a polite smile and nodded. "Thank you," I said softly before turning to leave. "Emily," Andrew called out, his voice tense. I turned to look at him, noticing the surprise in his eyes. He seemed unable to reconcile the person standing before him with the image he had of me, the woman who once revolved entirely around him and Ethan. "You were incredible today," he said earnestly. "I never imagined you'd achieve so much in academia. Do you finally realize your place?" I asked, a trace of mockery in my tone. Andrew's face showed a flash of embarrassment, but he quickly composed himself. "I'm not saying this because of your achievements," he said hurriedly. "Even before I knew about them, I've been trying to reconcile with you. I know you've hated me for betraying you." He looked nervous, as though he had finally grasped the widening distance between us. "Emily, I've always cared about you. What I had with Sarah was nothing more than fleeting novelty and a man's shallow vanity. I never intended to divorce you. Not even for a second. I didn't interrupt him, though I felt like I was listening to the biggest joke of both this life and the last. I only fought for custody of Ethan back then because I knew you couldn't bear to leave him. I thought it would stop you from going through with the divorce. But when you gave up custody, I was backed into a corner and had no choice but to agree. Even after the divorce, I never planned to be with Sarah. I was waiting for you to come back. He hesitated for a moment, then added, every time I was with Sarah, I took precautions. I never wanted her to get pregnant. I swear I never wanted that. So I'm supposed to thank you for having the decency to use protection while you cheated on me? I asked coldly. Andrew's face flushed, but he continued. When Sarah told me she was pregnant, I didn't doubt her. I assumed the precautions had failed. I never imagined she would betray me. But when she demanded a formal relationship, I didn't agree right away. Don't you remember that night I called you? If you had told me not to marry her, I wouldn't have done it. But you said nothing. So I married her out of spite. He paused, his voice trembling with emotion. Even on the day of the wedding, I waited for you to show up and stop it. If you had come, I would have chosen you without hesitation. But you didn't. Listening to Andrew's self-serving narrative of love, for me only deepened my disdain. After marrying Sarah, she turned my life into a circus. She made me a laughingstock in the business world. And only then did I realize how good I had it with you. How patient and forgiving you were. I wanted to divorce her and be with you again. But I couldn't because she was pregnant. Legally, I couldn't leave her. So I waited, hoping you'd give me another chance. I even thought of using Ethan to change your mind. But you kept rejecting me. And I was terrified I'd lose you forever. Andrew's eyes turned red as he spoke, his voice filled with despair. I found it laughable. Back then, I didn't sense even a shred of this fear he now claimed to have felt. Instead, he had stood tall and arrogant before me, utterly indifferent. When Sarah finally gave birth, we discovered the child wasn't mine. I was furious, but honestly, I also felt a wave of relief. Andrew's words hung in the air, but all I could feel was how absurd it all sounded. I can finally divorce Sarah and be with you, Andrew said, looking at me with anticipation in his eyes. Emily, I'm sorry. I made terrible mistakes in the past. From now on, if I ever hurt you again, I'll break my own legs. Ethan, standing beside him, quickly chimed in. Mom, I promise to always listen to you from now on and never hurt you again. Please don't stop loving me. I looked at them, at their earnestness, their regret, their hope, and their anticipation. Yet, I felt nothing. Andrew, seeing my lack of reaction, spoke again. Emily, please come back to us. Let us make up for the pain we caused you. That won't be necessary, I said, shaking my head. I've already healed from those wounds on my own. I don't need you. And I don't want you. Emily, Andrew began, but I interrupted him. Don't you realize by now that you're no longer worthy of me? I said, my tone cutting through his delusions. Andrew hurried to declare. Emily, I love you for who you are. Whether it's the old you or the current you. No matter how successful you are or not. Then why should I, someone who has become so successful, lower myself to pick up trash? I asked, laughing coldly. I gave him no room to save face. His face flushed red. Whether from embarrassment or shame, I didn't care. Yet he still didn't give up. You've been single all this time, haven't you? Emily, he said, clinging to his flawed logic. Convinced it was a sign I was waiting for him. I smiled faintly, then shifted my gaze to the side, where Jason Chun was approaching. Without hesitation, he wrapped his arm around my waist, as if he'd been waiting for this moment to perform his role. Jason greeted Andrew and Ethan with a bright smile. Hello, ex-husband and eldest son. Andrew's eyes fixated on Jason's hand around my waist, his expression darkening. Emily, are you seriously picking some random guy just to reject me? He's not random, I said firmly, cutting off whatever else Andrew intended to say. I stayed single all these years because I enjoyed being on my own. Now I'm no longer single because I found someone worth starting a new chapter with. Someone good enough to deserve a marriage with me. I saw Andrew's face contort as he struggled to accept my words, so I twisted the knife further. Whether I'm single or not has nothing to do with you. It's entirely my choice. And as for you, in my heart, you're nothing more than a stranger." With that, I turned and left with Jason, who wrapped his arm tighter around me. As we walked away, Jason glanced back and said casually, "By the way, Emily's pregnant. Twins." Jason knew exactly how to deliver a final, devastating blow. I didn't bother turning around to see Andrew or Ethan's reactions, but as we walked away, I faintly heard Ethan's trembling voice ask Andrew, "Dad, is Mom really never coming back to us?" Andrew's voice, low and restrained, responded, "No, she's not. She gave up on us a long time ago. I was just lying to myself." Ethan's white moonlight divorced after being cheated on. Without hesitation, he broke up with me and posted it on his social media. I wished I could go back 8 years and change the fate of Emma, who had married that scumbag. She was the one he had always longed for. Later, both of us were transported back 8 years in time. He altered Emma's fate to prevent her from marrying the scumbag, while I changed my fate of being with him. When I saw Ethan's social media post, I had just finished an 8-hour surgery. On my way back to the office, I collapsed in the hallway from exhaustion. When I woke up, I was in a dim, unfamiliar private room, surrounded by colorful, flashing lights and blaring music. Someone patted my shoulder and teased, "Claire, your drinking tolerance is terrible. Just one drink and you're out." My blurred vision slowly focused, and I realized it was Emma in front of me. She wore a short, wine-red dress and had her slightly curled long hair cascading down. I stared at her radiant and captivating face, remaining silent for a few seconds before stumbling into the bathroom. Looking at the mirror, I saw a fair and delicate face staring back at me. I splashed cold water on my forehead repeatedly, unable to deny the reality. The scars were gone. I had traveled back to 8 years ago, the year I had just started college. Today was my roommate Emma's birthday. I had accidentally drunk a high-proof drink and passed out on the couch for a long time. Groggily emerging from the bathroom, I bumped into someone. Before I could apologize, a familiar, deep voice said near my ear, "Sorry, are you okay?" My fingers instinctively tightened around my phone. I looked up to see the man before me. He was tall and well-built, with sharp, deep features. He wore a loose, plain black t-shirt. It was Ethan. Our gazes met and lingered for a few seconds. I ignored the ambiguous look in his eyes, lowered mine, and calmly replied, "I'm fine," before brushing past him and returning to the couch. I had just taken a sip of bottled water when Ethan entered the room. Emma greeted him with a bright smile, clinging to his arm as she introduced him to us. "This is my brother." The vibrant lights continued to swirl as he stood with one hand in his pocket, glancing down at us with a faint nod. If not for the brief encounter in the hallway earlier, this would have been our first meeting in this lifetime. Ethan was Emma's biological brother. He was also the man I had loved and been with for 6 years. It wasn't until Emma's wedding day that I realized the one he loved wasn't me. He had gotten recklessly drunk that night, and while holding me in his arms, he murmured tenderly, "Emma, Emma." That moment, I felt completely hollow, frozen in place. It took me a while to process what was happening. The person he loved was Emma, but that was when I loved him the most. So I pretended nothing had happened, stayed with him, and kept believing his claim that she's just my sister. Years later, when Emma divorced after being cheated on, I overheard her crying in Ethan's arms, saying, "Ethan, I never loved him. I've always loved you. Do you still want me?" He explained that their mother had a heart condition and had threatened to end her life if they were together, forcing him to feign affection for someone else and pair me with him. I didn't know if that was true, but Ethan believed her. That same night, he approached me and, after a long silence, said hoarsely, "Claire, let's break up." I looked at his handsome face and didn't even manage to ask the obvious, why, before being called away for an emergency surgery. Suppressing my emotions with logic and composure, I spent 8 hours in the operating room. When I came out, the first thing I saw was Ethan's social media post. I wish I could go back 8 years to change Emma's fate of marrying that scumbag. Now that I've returned to that time, I finally noticed the details I had previously ignored, or perhaps deliberately overlooked. Like the birthday cake Ethan had personally made for Emma, The way he gently coaxed the wine bottle out of her hands. Or how he unhesitatingly carried her on his back when the party ended and she drunkenly insisted on being carried. The other two roommates marveled at how good her brother was to her. And back then, I naively believed he was just her brother. That's why. Later, when Emma found someone she liked and started pairing Ethan with me, Ethan's kindness and attentiveness had indeed moved me. But when the truth was revealed, I realized that his gentleness had never been directed at me. Whether it was a birthday or an anniversary, he always seemed disinterested. Yet, whenever Emma was around, his attention was entirely on her. From beginning to end, Ethan only loved Emma. Like now, as I was sitting in the back seat of Ethan's car, sharing the space with my roommate, who was passed out drunk, Ethan glanced sideways at Emma, asleep in the front passenger seat. A strand of her long hair fluttered in the evening breeze. In the dim light, I silently observed as Ethan reached out his right hand toward Emma and softly murmured, "Emma, this time, I won't let you marry him." My heart pounded violently at that moment. I closed my eyes, plunging into darkness. But the realization was clear. Ethan had also traveled back in time. He wouldn't let Emma marry anyone else, and I wouldn't stay with him again. Back at the dormitory, lying on a bed that felt both familiar and foreign, I stared at the ceiling fan spinning lazily, blowing waves of warm air. My head throbbed slightly as I drifted into a fitful sleep. In my dreams, I seemed trapped in an endless loop, reliving the 8 years from meeting Ethan to breaking up with him. Over and over again, I heard him say, "Claire, let's break up." What finally pulled me from the nightmare was the vibration of my phone. I opened my eyes, dazed for a few seconds, then grabbed my phone and glanced at my schedule. Suddenly, I remembered. I had a part-time job tutoring a high school student in English. Glancing at the time, I quickly got out of bed, freshened up, grabbed a random bag of bread, and headed out. Thankfully, my subject was English, and because my work required me to read cutting-edge medical research, I hadn't let my English skills slip. I skimmed through the teaching materials beforehand to refresh my memory. The student was a high school girl. After finishing the prepared lesson, I began checking her English composition assigned by her school teacher. The topic was a simple one: me in 10 years. Resting her chin on her hand, she asked me, "Miss Claire, do you think I could become a comic artist in 10 years? I replied confidently, "Yes, you can. You won't even need 10 years. In 8 years, you'll have a massive fan base and be a very popular artist." She tilted her head and asked, "Then will Miss Claire become a doctor too?" "Yes," I said. Just then, her eyes lit up, and she pointed excitedly toward the window. "Look, Miss Claire, that must be Mr. Ryan. He'll definitely become a physics researcher." Through the rain-splattered glass, I looked up and met the gaze of a tall figure walking under a black umbrella. My heart clenched tightly, and a flood of memories surfaced. He wouldn't live to see 10 years later. 2 years from now, he would die in a car accident. His name was Ryan Monroe, a prize student of the infamous demon professor in our neighboring university's physics department. He was often the center of conversations among girls, frequently appearing on confession walls across universities. Known for his unparalleled looks and talent, the only perceived flaw was his humble beginnings. My interactions with him were minimal. I had seen him a few times in our school library. The most vivid memory, however, was during my junior year when I went to the hospital to visit Ethan, who was sick. On my way back to campus, crossing a zebra line with other pedestrians, a speeding car ran a red light, charging toward us. Amid the chaos and screams, a black Mercedes appeared out of nowhere, intercepting the car. The tires screeched violently as both vehicles collided with the distant guardrail. Instinctively, I ran toward the scene. Halfway there, a sudden explosion erupted. Flames engulfed my view, and for a moment, everything was silent. The cicadas on the nearby trees paused, only to resume their deafening cries moments later. No one survived inside the cars. A shard of glass grazed my forehead, leaving a scar. The incident made national headlines. The results revealed that one of the bodies belonged to the car's driver, a man who had lost everything to gambling and wanted revenge on society. The other was Ryan. He had borrowed his professor's car to retrieve some documents from another university and happened to be on that road on his way back. The internet was flooded with his information. Pictures of him, along with stories of his talents and accomplishments, spread rapidly. Many mourned his death, praising his beauty and brilliance. Some even said he died heroically, saving others. After all, he was alone in this world. His parents had both passed away during his senior year of high school. Later, I visited his grave with flowers and encountered his professor there. A chubby, elderly man stood in silence before the tombstone. Only when a drizzle began did he sigh deeply and say, "That boy had such a promising future." For a long time afterward, I suffered from insomnia. My heart felt like it was submerged in water, heavy and achingly sore. I thought it was guilt and regret for him. A gentle tug on my wrist pulled me from my thoughts. I snapped back to reality, noticing that Ryan's figure had already disappeared from outside the window. My student's voice pulled me back completely, saying, "Miss Claire, I'm heading to Mr. Ryan's physics class now. Don't forget what I just said. Okay? Don't be late tomorrow night." Honestly, I hadn't paid attention to what the student said earlier, but the distant memories from my previous life reminded me. Tomorrow was Ryan's birthday. Back then, his parents had been too busy to spend time with him, so he had asked me to keep him company. The rain outside had stopped at some point, and a warm ray of sunlight peeked through the clouds. I suddenly recalled the details I'd learned about Ryan online after his death. Tomorrow was indeed his birthday, but the truth was, Ryan never celebrated his birthday. He was born on a day marked by tragedy. His firefighter father had died in a fire during a rescue mission on the same day. He didn't even get to see his son once. I thought, perhaps Ryan wouldn't want to hear happy birthday, but it was the day he came into this world, and he shouldn't have to face it alone. The next day, I arrived at my student's house ahead of the agreed time, carrying a cake and a gift. Ryan was teaching a lesson. Outside the window, the sun was setting. He was wearing a simple white shirt, holding a test paper while standing at the wooden desk. He lowered his head slightly to review the material, his demeanor elegant and composed. Seeing him like this, I couldn't help but think of a rumor I'd come across in the past, a vague and unverifiable screenshot of a conversation. It was brief, just a few lines of text. Someone asked, "Ryan, do you have someone you like?" He replied, "Yes." Then why not tell them? The reply came 3 minutes later. Forget it. Most people didn't believe someone like Ryan, with his exceptional looks and talent, could ever harbor a quiet, unspoken crush. By then, of course, he was already gone. The truth would never be known. If he did have a crush, it was destined to remain buried forever. Whether it was the father he'd never met, his mother who fell ill and passed away, the secret love he never confessed, or the bright future cut short, Ryan's life was full of regrets. A genius like him, from our university's physics department, deserved a better ending. When the lesson ended, the sky outside had darkened completely. My student eagerly grabbed the art supplies I had bought for her, hugging them tightly. If only Mr. Ryan didn't have other plans, we could have had all three of us together. She sighed. I paused for a moment, then looked at Ryan, who was tidying up and preparing to leave. On impulse, I said, "Mr. Ryan, why don't you stay?" Before I could elaborate, the power suddenly went out, plunging the room into pitch-black darkness. I coughed lightly and lied, "We girls are afraid of the dark. Why don't you stay a bit longer?" The room fell silent for a moment. Then, with a small click, a flame ignited. Ryan had lit a lighter, shielding the small flame with his hand. The flickering light accentuated the sharp contours of his face, making his features even more defined. He looked at me and said simply, "All right." Using the lighter, I lit the candles on the cake and placed it in front of them. "Today, we're celebrating the continuation of life," I said seriously, looking at them. "May the rest of your lives be safe and happy." Setting aside my guilt toward Ryan, no one wished more than I did for him to have a peaceful and happy life from now on. The dim room filled with the sweet scent of the cake. Together, we shared it. My student, biting her spoon, ran into the study and returned with her report card, saying excitedly, "Miss Claire, my mom said I improved so much on this exam. She wants to treat you both to dinner to thank you." Looking at the report card, I remembered this happening in my previous life. But back then, Emma had asked me to help her move props for a photo shoot, so I politely declined the dinner invitation. As my thoughts wandered, I glanced at Ryan, sitting quietly in the soft light. Suddenly, I realized something. On that dinner day in my previous life, I was supposed to meet Ryan properly, but I never made it to dinner. On my way, I had saved a child from being hit by a car and ended up in the hospital with a leg injury, unable to attend. To prove I wasn't just flaking on them, I took a photo and sent it to the girl's parents. The picture showed exactly where I was, along with a brief explanation to assure them I wasn't being unreliable. While waiting for the doctor to apply ointment, I casually scrolled through social media and stumbled upon Emma's latest post. It was a series of photos from her photography club's activities. And of course, Ethan was in the frame. As always, he showed up whenever Emma called. I remembered our 4th anniversary vividly. That day, Emma had a fight with her boyfriend, went to a bar, got drunk, and called Ethan, crying, "Ethan, I'm so upset. Can you come keep me company?" That time, Ethan and I had just arrived at a nice restaurant for dinner. We hadn't even ordered when he stood up, ready to leave. I offered to go with him, but he stopped me, saying, "Emma's always been proud. She wouldn't want you to see her like this." I asked, "What about you? Would she want you to see her like that?" "It's different. We grew up together," he replied. Not long after, Emma made up with her boyfriend. At a party, I overheard her jokingly telling him, "You're not the only one who likes me. If you make me angry again, I'll leave you." Ethan, who was nearby, silently drank his wine and said nothing. Deep down, Ethan must have always known. Emma was fully aware of his feelings but pretended not to notice, continuing to enjoy his unwavering devotion while staying with the man she truly loved. As for me, Ethan's simple explanation, "She's my sister, and she's your friend," was enough to silence any protest I might have had. Thankfully, in this new life, I wouldn't let myself become their convenient third wheel again. After getting my wound bandaged, I hobbled out of the hospital. Halfway down the street, it began to rain. The wound couldn't get wet, so I gritted my teeth against the pain and found a sheltered spot to call for a ride. Unfortunately, my phone had run out of battery. The late summer wind carried a slight chill as I resigned myself to waiting for the rain to stop. Just then, Ryan appeared. He came through the rain, holding an umbrella. Without a word, he removed his jacket, tied it around my injured leg, handed me the umbrella, and picked me up in his arms. "The road here is too narrow for a car. Let's find a better spot," he said, leaning against his chest. I could smell a faint mix of bitterness and freshness. His steady heartbeat filled my ears as my gaze drifted from his Adam's apple to his profile. When we finally got into a car, I asked, "Why are you here?" He explained matter-of-factly, "Your student's mother was worried about you. She asked me to check on you since I had a meeting nearby. When I couldn't reach you, I started looking for you." The rain made the car interior feel damp and warm. I cracked the window slightly, wondering just how many places he had searched. Fatigue crept in, and I fell asleep. When I woke up, the rain had stopped, and we were at the campus gate. Ryan carefully helped me out of the car and carried me to the dormitory. Before leaving, I thanked him. He looked down at me with a faint smile and said, "No need to thank me, Miss Claire." Back in my dorm, I noticed that Ryan's jacket was still tied around my injured leg. Few days later, when I went to return it, fall had already arrived. Because of the rain and my need to rest, I hadn't left campus much. It was a sunny weekend when I finally went to find him. I realized I'd been impulsive. I didn't even have his contact information. Searching for him felt like looking for a needle in a haystack. I didn't find Ryan, but I did unexpectedly run into Ethan. I was passing by the basketball court when I heard someone shout, "Call an ambulance." He passed out. My instincts as a doctor kicked in, and I ran over. Pushing through the crowd, a boy was unconscious on the ground. I immediately knelt down, performed CPR, and after about 15 minutes, he regained consciousness. The paramedics arrived shortly after, and as I stood up to leave, I noticed Ethan watching me from across the crowd. He was wearing a red and black jersey, his expression calm, his gaze steady. I picked up Ryan's jacket and turned to leave. Behind me, I heard a boy ask Ethan, "Do you know her?" "No," Ethan replied. I found a nearby cafe to rest and regain my strength. The occasional chime of the wind chime on the door was soothing as I idly played a game on my phone. The bell rang again, and I looked up. Ryan was standing in front of me. At that exact moment, the sound of my game signaling game over played on my phone. I looked at Ryan in surprise and smiled. "What a coincidence to meet you here." The next second, he raised an eyebrow and said, "Not a coincidence. I came to find you." Seeing my puzzled expression, he opened his phone and placed it in front of me. The screen displayed a post on the university's confession page. The image was of me performing CPR on the basketball court, with a caption that read, "Within 3 minutes. I want all the information about this woman." The post had been up for less than half an hour, but it already had hundreds of comments. Most people were just there for the excitement, but a few were making thoughtful observations. "She seems to know professional first aid techniques, probably from the medical school nearby. Why is she on our campus? The jacket she's holding looks like a men's coat. Could it belong to her boyfriend? Is he from our university?" I didn't continue reading, feeling slightly embarrassed. I picked up the jacket beside me and handed it to Ryan. "I've washed it already," I said. That night, when I returned to the dorm, my ever-curious roommate immediately shoved her phone in my face. "Look at this," she exclaimed. On the confession page was a new post. "Case solved. She's Ryan's girlfriend from the physics department." The attached photo was of me handing the jacket back to Ryan at the cafe, with a pink filter that made the interaction look far more intimate than it actually was. As my roommate's gossiping spirit burned bright, I quickly explained the situation to her. After listening to the entire story, she sighed with disappointment but then added, "Well, this has potential. I'll ship it for now." I chuckled helplessly and glanced at Ryan's contact in my phone. His username was simply Ryan, and his profile picture was a plain white origami crane. After some thought, I renamed him as Mr. Ryan in my contacts. His social media was clean and sparse, with only one post. "The wind is picking up." The timestamp matched the day we first met. For some reason, I was reminded of another timeline. On the 6th anniversary of Ryan's death, I visited his grave with a bouquet of flowers. The rain had just stopped, and the setting sun painted the sky in hues of gold and orange. My shadow fell on his tombstone as I silently gazed at his photo, the same composed and gentle face. Suddenly, a breeze swept by, lifting the strands of hair that had fallen over my face. The leaves rustled in the wind, sounding like the opening chapter of a new story. Then, time reversed, and I was brought back to this moment, where we met again. I felt fortunate to have returned before meeting Ethan. Instead of wasting this second chance on revenge, I decided to let us become strangers. Strangers. Just like that day on the basketball court when he said he didn't know me. Freshman year was chaotic and hurried, and it ended abruptly. If my memory served me right, among the incoming freshmen at Ryan's university, there would soon be someone Emma would fall for. He was Ethan's direct junior. In the previous timeline, they met at a party organized by Ethan, and Emma quickly developed feelings for him. From there, she started pairing me with Ethan. Through her deliberate matchmaking and manufactured coincidences, Ethan eventually asked me to be with him. Now that Ethan had also returned to the past, he would likely prevent Emma from meeting that boy, ensuring he could be with her. That seemed like the inevitable conclusion, but fate often has a way of surprising us. During the last professional exam before the break, I was seated diagonally behind Ryan. I had just finished my paper and was about to hand it in when I noticed him suddenly wake from a nap. He stood up abruptly, grabbed his exam paper, glanced at it, and then looked around the room. Grabbing the arm of the confused student next to him, he asked, "What year is it now? Tell me, what year is this?" I silently watched his back as I walked up to submit my paper and left the room. Outside the exam hall, Ethan was waiting. As I passed him, he called out to me. I stopped and looked at him questioningly. He asked, "Are you with him now?" I didn't know what he meant by that question, so I simply replied, "What does it have to do with you?" After that, because of the break, I didn't see Ethan or Ryan for quite some time. I thought that starting over, Ethan and Emma would finally find their way to happiness together. But I was wrong. Even in this new timeline, Emma didn't choose Ethan. She still fell for Ethan's junior, just as she had in the previous timeline. Her words to Ethan after her divorce, asterisk, "You were the one I loved all along," asterisk, were nothing more than a lie. What surprised me was, this time, Emma didn't try to pair me with Ethan. Instead, she focused on pairing Ethan with the woman who, in the future, would be the reason her husband cheated on her. I had no idea what happened during the break, but when we met again, Emma and that woman had already become friends. The night air was chilly as I hugged my books and walked back to the dorm. From a distance, I saw Ethan and Emma talking downstairs. Without pausing, I passed by them. Their conversation drifted into my ears as I walked away. "Emma, I'll say it again. He's no good. You're too naive. If you don't stay away from him, you'll end up being hurt." Emma's coy voice responded, "Ethan, trust me. You don't understand him. He's really a great guy. Just try being with him for a while. Okay? Please." 2 months later, Emma officially announced her new relationship. That day, I attended a party, only to encounter a drunken Ethan in the hallway outside the private room. On my way back from the restroom, he suddenly pulled me into his arms. The overpowering smell of alcohol engulfed me. I struggled, but the more I resisted, the tighter his grip became. His low, hoarse voice murmured in my ear, "Emma, why are you with him? He'll hurt you in the future. You must have been forced into this. I know you like me. I know the one you love is me." When my struggles failed, I raised my leg, ready to kick his shin. But just as I was about to, the hand pressing against my back abruptly let go. The next moment, Ethan was forcefully yanked away. His wrist seized, and he was thrown to the ground. I nearly fell due to the sudden release, but a strong arm caught me around my waist, steadying me. It was Ryan. He happened to be here for his group celebratory dinner and had come outside for some air. Accidentally stumbling upon this scene, Ethan, clearly sobering up after the impact, leaned against the wall, his expression a mix of embarrassment and anger. He sneered at me. "Claire, every word you say is a waste of time." Ignoring him, I grabbed Ryan's arm and was about to leave when Ethan's voice rang out again, laced with sarcasm. "Aren't you proud of yourself, Claire? I know you've always liked me. Seeing that I didn't end up with Emma must make you happy, right? But even if you're with him now, so what? He's just a dead man walking. He's going to die anyway." Ethan's words made it clear that he was confusing events and emotions from both timelines, his instability driving him to lash out recklessly. I didn't care what he said about me, but he had no right to talk about Ryan like that. I stopped in my tracks and turned back to face Ethan, who was still looking at us with disdain. Word by word, I told him, "Shut up, Ethan. He's not going to die. Because I'm here now. I'm going to change his fate." Even though I couldn't go back to the moment when his father sacrificed himself to save others, or the time before his mother's illness took her life, I had returned to this moment. I could save him now. As we stepped out of the hotel, the sound of car horns echoed in the distance. Only then did I realize I was still holding Ryan's hand. His palm felt warm and slightly damp. I paused for a moment before quickly letting go and hiding my hand behind my back, clenching it into a fist to conceal my embarrassment. "Sorry. And, thank you," I said, trying to compose myself. Ryan's hand, which had been resting at his side, clenched into a loose fist. Looking down slightly, he asked what he said earlier. My heart skipped a beat, and I interrupted him hastily. He was drunk and spouting nonsense. Don't believe a word of it. Ryan, you'll have a bright future ahead of you. You still have so much time left. We stood in silence for a few moments before Ryan suddenly smiled, his demeanor relaxing. And you? You'll definitely become an excellent doctor in the future. Right. I smiled back at him, bright and determined. As long as I'm alive, I'll do everything I can to save lives. Emma didn't succeed in pairing Ethan with that woman, but the woman still developed feelings for Ethan and began to cling to him. In a way, Emma's goal was achieved because that woman wouldn't have the chance to ruin her future marriage now. What Emma didn't anticipate was that Ethan had also traveled back in time. He stubbornly clung to the words she had once said to him in the past, a lie that had become like an oxygen mask for him. allowing him to sustain his misguided love. But it was Emma herself who would ultimately shatter that illusion. At a party I didn't attend, as my roommates later described with complicated expressions, Emma got drunk and slapped that woman. No one could hold her back as she screamed, "You shameless homewrecker." Her boyfriend tried to stop her, but the more he did, the more erratic Emma became. What struck me as odd was how Ethan, her brother, remained calm throughout the ordeal. He stood to the side, silently watching as Emma spiraled out of control in her drunken tantrum. I was momentarily surprised, opening my mouth as if to say something, but in the end, I stayed silent. Ethan's calm wasn't indifference, it was resignation. He had realized the truth. He knew Emma had also traveled back in time. Not only had she chosen not to be with him, but she had even used him as a pawn to block someone else. To Emma, Ethan was nothing more than a tool. Ethan, in his own eyes, had become a joke. After that, I didn't see him seeking out Emma as frequently, but Emma didn't seem to care. I encountered Ethan a few times while visiting Ryan at his university. The most vivid memory was when Ryan and I went to a newly opened restaurant just outside campus. On our way, we passed by an outdoor barbecue stand where a fight had broken out. Ethan was in the middle of it. The scene quickly descended into chaos, with shouts, screams, and the sound of shattering glass filling the air. A broken beer bottle flew toward me, sharp fragments glinting in the dim light. Ryan reacted swiftly, pulling me into his arms. The glass grazed his cheek, leaving a thin, bloodied line. Startled, I gasped, "Ryan!" He quickly led me into a dumpling shop across the street and reassured me, "It's okay. Don't be scared." By the time the police arrived, the commotion had inexplicably died down. Using bottled water, I gently cleaned Ryan's wound, then dug a green cartoon bandage out of my pocket. Carefully, I prepared to apply it. The door burst open, and Ethan walked in with a few others from the fight. They all bore varying degrees of injury. Ethan's lip was still smeared with dried blood, faint evidence that it had been hastily wiped away. While his friends loudly cursed the other party from the fight, I continued calmly applying the bandage to Ryan. Suddenly, Ethan kicked the table with a resounding thud, silencing the group. The next day, while walking through campus in light snow, Ethan stopped me. His face was bruised, and his gaze carried a mix of emotions. "Claire," he began, "it won't work out between you two. Take my advice. Don't fall for him." My expression turned cold. Without pausing, I threw back, "I'm not a psychiatrist. Don't come to me." As I walked away, his voice followed, carrying an air of nonchalance but also bitterness. "Claire, the person you're supposed to love is me." Reflecting on it now, my life had been smooth and uneventful, except for the detour of meeting Ethan and Emma, which wasted 6 years of my life. Ryan, however, was someone I owed a life to. When I first traveled back in time, I thought my purpose was to change my fate of being with Ethan, but as time passed, I realized that wasn't the case. One afternoon near the end of sophomore year, I woke abruptly from a nightmare. In it, I returned to that fateful intersection, crossing the road with the crowd. A speeding car hurtled toward us, and I watched helplessly as the black Mercedes intercepted it, followed by the deafening explosion. The old ceiling fan above me whirred, blowing strands of my hair into disarray as I stared blankly at the ceiling. I had always known this was an unsolvable problem. Beyond the driver's motivation for revenge against society, I had no other information about him. I could save Ryan. I could avoid going to that intersection. But what about the elderly man, the child, the pregnant woman, and the students who would be there instead? Once, in my desperation, I went to the police with a 1 in 10,000 chance they could help. Their response was curt. "Mississippi, have you been watching too many sci-fi movies? Our investigations are based on science, not mysticism." By early June, the college entrance exams were underway, marking the end of both Ryan's and my tutoring jobs. By then, I had known him for nearly 2 years. Yet, he never mentioned any special girl, and I could almost confirm that the screenshot of the so-called secret crush was fake. I had often wondered about the type of girl Ryan might like. Perhaps she'd be beautiful, or intelligent, or as extraordinary as he was. But whatever she was like, she would undoubtedly be someone special. That night, The students' parents invited us to dinner again to express their gratitude. By the time we finished, it was already dark. Ryan and I walked together down a moonlit alley. Perhaps it was because we knew this was where our paths would part. Or maybe it was just the melancholic nature of the night that brought out hidden thoughts. As we passed under a dim street lamp, I broke the silence, pretending to ask casually, "Ryan, do you have someone you like?" He stayed silent for a long moment before answering with another question. "Why do you ask?" I replied, "If you ever have someone you like, make sure to tell them. Don't keep it to yourself and let them remain unaware. If you say it out loud, you might have a chance." As petals drifted in the breeze, we paused at the intersection. Ryan suddenly turned to me and said sincerely, "Claire, thank you," thinking he was thanking me for the advice. I didn't dwell on it and continued living my days as usual. Then came the day before Ryan's sacrifice in the previous timeline. His professor had asked him to drive the next day to pick up some documents. When I learned about it, I asked if he could go in the afternoon instead. I told him a friend had given me 2 movie tickets and asked him to go with me in the morning. He agreed. The movie I chose was random, coincidentally about time travel. It told the story of a woman who went back in time to mend the regrets of a man she loved, only to realize that their shared love was just a dream. But I didn't see how it ended. Halfway through, I turned to Ryan, who was intently watching the film, and told him I needed to use the restroom. Calmly, I left the theater as if it were any other day. Outside, I got into the car I'd rented and drove to the intersection. On the way there, it hit me. Our meeting had always been a prelude to parting. "Ryan," I thought, "this time, it's your turn to see the future." When I arrived at the intersection, I saw the familiar crowd waiting to cross the street. I waited for the car to appear. Suddenly, an explosion rang out nearby, making my heart jolt violently. My mind went blank for a moment, and I quickly got out of the car, calling Ryan as I ran toward the burning wreckage. The phone kept ringing, but no one answered. I stood before the flames and debris, my vision blurred by tears. A wave of dizziness swept over me, and the last thing I remembered was that I still hadn't been able to save him. When I woke up, I was in a hospital room. The air was filled with the familiar scent of disinfectant. Beside my bed were my phone and a white lab coat. A nurse I recognized explained that I had fainted and been asleep for 20 minutes. She told me it was 6 years later. I stared at the curtain swaying gently in the breeze, momentarily unable to tell if I dreamed of the past or if this was reality. It wasn't until I went to the restroom, splashed cold water on my face, and looked at my reflection, seeing that the scar on my forehead was gone, that I knew for certain I had truly traveled back. My hands trembling, I picked up my phone and quickly searched for news about the accident. All I found was a short, obscure record in an old article. There was no headline, no trending topic, no mention of Ryan, his name, his story, his gravestone. Everything was gone. I asked countless people if they remembered the accident from 6 years ago, the one that had saved so many lives and had once been a hot topic online. The responses were always the same. "Claire, are you sure you're not misremembering? There was an accident, but it didn't make the news." I don't know. 6 years ago was too long ago. Ryan had no family left. His former classmates had scattered across the country. I went to his university to find his professor, only to learn he had moved abroad. There was no trace of Ryan, no evidence he had ever existed. The only thing that confirmed our connection was the last message in his chat history with me, sent the day before the accident. It was his reply agreeing to see the movie. For 6 years after his death, there was only emptiness. I typed into the chat box but never hit send. I was afraid it would become a message that would never receive a reply. As long as I didn't send it, I could believe he was still alive. I developed a habit of taking walks around his university whenever I had free time, often ending up by the lake we used to visit. His old lab was nearby, on the first floor. Through the clear glass windows, I seemed to see a slender figure in a white lab coat at the lab bench, bent over and focused, jotting down numbers on a piece of paper. But in the next second, the image disappeared. Ethan came to find me the day after I returned to the past. He said, "Let's not break up. It was just a moment of impulsiveness. Please, give me another chance." Faced with his humble and pleading demeanor, I paused my pen. mid-sentence in my patient notes, and calmly looked up at him. Ethan, were we ever together? The color drained from his face in an instant. The truth was, he had no evidence to prove that we had ever been together. After traveling back in time, it wasn't just the news of Ryan's sacrifice that disappeared. My 6-year relationship with Ethan was erased as well. Fate had brought all 4 of us back to 8 years ago. Ethan wanted to change Emma's fate of marrying a scumbag and be with her. So he personally altered the course of our relationship. While he eventually realized that he was just being used as a tool, the result remained. There was no longer any connection between him and me. Afterward, Ethan became desperate, searching for any shred of evidence to prove we had once been together. But his efforts were in vain. On his phone, there were no photos of us, no chat history. None of our mutual friends recognized each other anymore. Surveillance footage from places we used to frequent didn't show me. As time passed, my coworkers, who initially gossiped about the handsome man pursuing me, eventually sighed. What a shame. He must have some mental issues. I smiled and gently suggested to Ethan when he appeared yet again. Go left out the door to the psychiatry department. You should get checked out. Since I adamantly refused to acknowledge our past relationship, the only person who knew about it was Emma. After traveling back, she was once again cheated on. Even though Ethan had prevented the future affair between her and the woman who would ruin her marriage. A person destined to cheat will always find a way. During the time Ethan was entangled with me, both Emma and that woman were clinging to him as well. Emma tried desperately to appeal to Ethan, telling him how much she loved him, how helpless she had been. Initially, Ethan remained indifferent, then grew increasingly impatient. One day, after Ethan refused to meet her, Emma came to me and caused a scene. I silently watched her tantrum, then calmly called security to escort her out. Go left out the door to the psychiatry department. I told her. You should get checked out too. My coworkers sighed again. They really are from the same family. Both seem to have a few screws loose. After some peace, I encountered Ethan and Emma again a month later. I was at the lab to pick up some documents from a colleague when I saw Ethan furiously throwing papers at 3 people across the room. I didn't pay it much attention and turned to leave. Later, I learned from my coworker what had happened. Ethan had overheard a heated argument between Emma and her mother, during which her mother revealed that they had a blood relationship. A DNA test confirmed it. Ethan and Emma were half-siblings, sharing the same father. Their birth dates were only 3 months apart, meaning Ethan's father had cheated while his mother was pregnant. The lie Emma once told Ethan, about their mother threatening to end her life if they were together, had come full circle and turned out to be true. By mid-May, I was invited to give a lecture on first aid at a university. The auditorium was packed, and the lecture ended successfully. As I packed up my materials, I noticed a familiar silhouette in the dispersing crowd. But before I could get a clear look, the figure disappeared. The sky had darkened, and a light rain began to fall as I reached the auditorium doors. After a moment's hesitation, I used my folder to shield my head and prepared to dash into the rain. Suddenly, a black umbrella appeared over me. A familiar, faintly bitter yet comforting scent reached me as water droplets slid off the slanted edge of the umbrella. My heart skipped a beat. I froze, my hand still holding the folder above my head, and slowly turned around. There he was, Ryan, whom I hadn't seen in 6 years. He looked just as he had back then, his face calm and cold, his sharp features illuminated by the soft glow of the streetlights. After the explosion, Ryan had been taken abroad by his professor for medical treatment. He had been in a coma for nearly 2 years. After waking up, he stayed overseas for continued recovery and pursued his studies, eventually joining a research institute. Now, he had returned to teach as a professor in the physics department at this university. He summarized those 6 years in just a few simple sentences. I blinked. Countless words I wanted to say condensing into just 2. That's great. He was alive. It was great to know that Ryan, once Mr. Ryan to me, now Professor Ryan, was still here. What hadn't changed was his popularity among women. It was said that his lectures were always so packed that some students had to stand to listen. Out of curiosity, I thought about sneaking into one of his lectures during my free time. Unfortunately, on the day I chose, His class had been switched with another professor's. I didn't know until it was too late. Sitting in an interior corner by the window, I realized trying to leave would only draw attention to myself, as standing up would disrupt a large section of the students around me. I hesitated for half the lecture before texting Ryan. I wanted to attend your class, but it seems I entered the wrong one. What should I do now? Just as I sent the message, the professor unexpectedly called on me to answer a question. I stared at the geology problem on the board, clueless. Taking a deep breath, I was about to apologize and admit I'd walked into the wrong class when a soft beep behind me gave me the answer. Without thinking, I repeated it and got it right. As I sat back down, my phone vibrated. Ryan hadn't responded yet. Thinking about the help from the student behind me, I turned to thank them, only to meet a familiar face. Ryan was sitting casually, dressed in a black hoodie with the hood slightly pulled over his head. His bangs hung low, covering part of his eyebrows. For a brief moment, I felt as though I was seeing the Ryan from 8 years ago. Quickly, I turned back around, pretending I hadn't noticed. A moment later, my phone buzzed with a new message. I noticed you walked into this classroom. I was curious what kind of class could interest a doctor so much that she'd attended herself. Above his text was the one I had sent him earlier. Before I could respond, another message came in. So it turns out this is actually my lecture. I couldn't help but smile. Over the 6 years we've been apart, Ryan's personality seemed to have changed slightly. He still carried that cool and distant demeanor, but now he seemed a bit less restrained. From then on, my relationship with Ryan returned to what it had been 6 years ago, though with an inexplicable new dynamic. First, I couldn't put my finger on what was different. That was until one day, when I went to visit him at the university and overheard a conversation. One of his colleagues, seemingly frustrated by love, sighed and asked him, "Professor Ryan, how do I make her realize I like her?" Then, after a pause, they added, but you wouldn't understand the pain of unrequited love. You don't have that kind of trouble, do you?" Ryan didn't respond. The colleague pressed further. "Tell me, have you rejected so many people because you already like someone?" Holding my breath, I heard him reply softly with a single word, "Yes." I didn't interrupt. Silently, I turned and left. 6 years is long enough for many things to change. I had to admit, I liked Ryan. I couldn't pinpoint when the feeling shifted from wanting to make up for what he'd lost to romantic affection. But at that time, knowing there would be no outcome, I chose to suppress it. For a long time afterward, I used work and overtime as excuses to keep my interactions with him limited, maintaining a polite but distant relationship. That lasted until Ryan began showing up in my consultation room 3 days in a row. Finally, I couldn't hold back a small sigh of exasperation. "Ryan, you don't need to come every day." He was persistent, responding seriously. I registered and queued up. "I mean, you don't need to keep coming for something so minor." He was silent for a moment, then lowered his voice, as though holding something back. "Actually, I'm not coming for the medical issues." Before he could finish, a large, aggressive man suddenly stormed into the room. I immediately recognized him as the man who had recently caused his wife's death by domestic violence. After enduring years of abuse, she had overdosed on medication and, despite the hospital's best efforts, had died during treatment. He had always believed that doctors were responsible for his wife's death, and now, in his rage, he pointed a knife at me, shouting venomously, "It's your fault my wife died." In the ensuing chaos, the man was subdued, but not before Ryan stepped in to protect me and got slashed across his shoulder. The wound required 10 stitches. I stood by his hospital bed, staring at his pale face. A sharp ache rose in my chest, and my voice came out hoarse, trembling slightly. "I'm sorry." Whether it was in the past or now, Ryan always seemed to get hurt because of me. After he spent 2 weeks in the hospital, I drove him home. On the way, I gently suggested, "Should I hire a housekeeper for you? It might help avoid misunderstandings." He was typing on his phone with one hand but paused mid-message, raising his head to ask, "What misunderstandings?" The car fell silent. A soft breeze blew in through the slightly open window, ruffling the hair on his forehead, and ripples spread through the calm lake of my heart. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel as I kept my eyes fixed on the road ahead, choosing not to answer. In the end, he refused to let a stranger into his home to take care of him, so I took on the responsibility. Not that Ryan needed much help. Each morning before work, I'd prepare lunch for him and have breakfast with him before heading out. In the evenings, we'd eat dinner together. Over time, a strange feeling began to creep into my heart. One evening, I couldn't decline an invitation to a coworker's birthday party. Beforehand, I called Ryan to let him know I'd be home late. On the way back, my car broke down, and a male coworker who lived nearby offered me a ride to my building. As soon as I opened the door, a strong, sour smell hit me. At the dining table, Ryan was poking at his food with a calm expression. "What are you eating?" I asked. He looked up, his tone nonchalant. "Can't you tell? I'm eating vinegar." I walked over to the table and glanced down at his plate. He had ordered dumplings, and the small dish in front of him was filled to the brim with vinegar. Shaking my head, I boiled some noodles for him, opened a window to air out the room, and gently reminded him, "Don't eat like that again. The smell of vinegar is overwhelming." He lowered his gaze and silently ate the noodles, not saying a word. The next day, one of Ryan's colleagues came to visit him, a coworker who had once asked him if he had someone he liked. Seeing this person stirred up emotions I had tried to bury. Ryan had someone he liked. I didn't know what the colleague said to him, but his mood seemed to shift subtly afterward. I felt a pang of frustration at myself for paying too much attention to him. That evening, over dinner, I told him, "Your wound is healing nicely. It should be fully recovered soon." He glanced at me, nodded, and softly said, "Mm." After we ate, I quietly went to the bathroom to prepare a warm bath for him, reminding him not to let the water touch his stitches. But as I was leaving, I slipped, and before I could fall, he caught me and pulled me into his arms. The rapid thudding of our hearts filled the steamy room, and for a moment, I couldn't tell whose heartbeat was louder. When I tried to steady myself and pull away, his arms tightened around my waist, holding me firmly in place. The mist in the bathroom swirled around us, and every point of contact between us felt like it was igniting with heat. He looked down at me, his expression different from usual. His eyes held a turbulent intensity, and his voice was deep and raspy. "Claire," he said, "I need to admit something." "What is it?" I whispered. He hesitated for a second before continuing. "I have feelings for you." My mind was a chaotic mess. My rationality burned to ashes by the heat in the air. Instinctively, I blurted out, "But you already said you like someone." Before I could finish, he leaned closer, turning me toward the bathroom mirror. With one hand, he wrote a single word in the fogged glass. "Yes." Not long after we started dating, I finally asked a question that had been buried in my heart for a long time. "Why didn't you contact me during the 6 years you were abroad?" He was sitting on the couch, reading a physics journal. At my question, he pulled me into his arms. The faint, bitter scent that was uniquely his enveloped me as his deep voice answered. I was scared. Before I could say anything, he continued, holding me tighter. "I was afraid of becoming disabled, of not being good enough for you, afraid that if I reached out, I'd want more. And most of all, I was afraid you'd already fallen for someone else." His words stirred a bittersweet ache in my chest, and the corners of my eyes burned with unshed tears. I hugged him tightly, overwhelmed with emotion, and said, "Ryan, you're amazing. To have made it through so much and still stand here in front of me." There was a moment of silence before his hand moved down along my waist. He chuckled softly, his voice low and teasing. "Dr. Claire, I can be even more amazing. Want to see for yourself?" The tender atmosphere shattered instantly. Later, Ryan seemed determined to prove his point, repeatedly and thoroughly demonstrating his capabilities. He would even pause halfway and ask me, "Am I amazing?" I never answered, and he never stopped asking. The first time Ryan took me to visit his parents was 6 months into our relationship. Standing before the gravestone, I was taken aback to see the face of the woman etched into it. She was beautiful and graceful, though the illness that had ravaged her had left her unrecognizable in the end. She passed away while I was by her side. Ryan said quietly. I realized then that my mother had been her attending physician. During my senior year of high school, whenever I visited my mom at the hospital, I often saw a kind woman in one of the rooms. If my mom wasn't in her office, I would wait in that woman's room, and over time, I grew close to her. I would cut fruit for her, fold paper cranes, and chat with her. But just before my final exams, she passed away. It was my first experience confronting a major illness and death. I think that's when I started to understand why my parents, as doctors, could never find time to spend with me. That's also why I ended up choosing a field I once hated, medicine. Back then, I naively thought cancer was the only disease that couldn't be cured. But after studying medicine, I learned that very few illnesses can be completely defeated. I never expected that she was Ryan's mother. On the way back, I leaned against the car window, watching the blur of passing greenery, and said softly, "Ryan, I met your mother a long time ago." His response was calm. "I know." My heart stirred slightly. Had he seen me back then? I saw Ethan again 6 months later. One evening as I was about to leave work, Ryan had sent me a message saying he'd arrive in 10 minutes. After changing clothes, I got into the elevator and ran into Ethan. He looked pale and gaunt, his frame visibly thinner. We were alone in the elevator, and the silence was heavy. When the doors opened on the ground floor, I walked out without hesitation. But just as I stepped forward, Ethan grabbed my arm. "Claire," he said quietly, his gaze downcast. "Can we talk?" Frowning, I shook off his grip and replied coldly, "Ethan, stop wasting both our time." He seemed to have anticipated my response. With a self-deprecating smile, he said, "You probably won't believe me, but on another path of fate, we were together for 6 years. I didn't bother to respond, turning and walking away. Behind me, his voice dropped even lower. "I'm sorry I wasn't good to you. That's why I lost you." My steps faltered briefly but quickly regained their pace. Outside the hospital, Ryan was waiting for me by the flower beds. The warm hues of the setting sun cast a golden glow over him. For some reason, I thought back to when the students' parents invited us to dinner for the second time. I had arrived early to thank them for their concern when I was injured. The parent had looked puzzled and said, "I never asked Ryan to check on you. I only casually mentioned why you weren't there." Later, Ryan had said he needed to leave for something at school. So that's how it was. My thoughts were interrupted when Ryan took my hand, gently brushing back a strand of my hair that had been tousled by the evening breeze. He tucked it behind my ear. I looped my arm around his and leaned slightly against him, a sense of warmth spreading through my chest. Smiling, I said, "Ryan, the wind's picking up." Ryan's perspective. Epilogue. The online rumors weren't wrong. I am alone in this world. If my death meant saving countless families, then so be it. But truthfully, I'm not as noble as people think. Self-preservation is human nature. However, if someone I cared about was involved, I wouldn't hesitate. I would willingly trade my life for her survival. After the explosion, when I regained consciousness, I found myself trapped in a cemetery. In the beginning, every year on the anniversary of my death, the people I saved and a few netizens would come to visit. What I heard most often were words of gratitude and praise, saying my death had been meaningful. Later, only Claire came. She rarely spoke. Most of the time, she would place flowers in front of my gravestone, clean up the surrounding area, and then sit quietly for a while. The first words I heard her say were on the 4th anniversary of my death. By then, no one else came to visit. In the misty rain, she stood before my gravestone. Her head bowed as she looked at my photograph. Her voice carried a solemn promise. "Ryan, don't worry. I won't forget you." It was the first time she called me by my name. I never thought meeting her would be tied to my death, but if I had to do it all over again, I would make the same choice. So, when I unexpectedly returned to 8 years ago, 6 years after my death, I made peace with my decision once more. I knew she had also traveled back in time. I understood that her closeness to me was born out of guilt and a desire to make amends. But that was enough. It was better than never having known her at all, wasn't it? The years I spent alone had been unbearably long, while the 2 years I knew her made time feel fleeting for the first time. If I couldn't be her lover, then being someone she would never forget for the rest of her life wasn't such a bad alternative. I don't actually remember what the perpetrator looked like. nor do I recall his license plate number. But I do remember that before reaching the intersection, he had thrown several beer cans out of his car window, drinking as he drove. That would be the only clue I had to stop him before Claire arrived. When I saw him toss another beer can out of his car window, I honked my horn as I caught up to him. Unexpectedly, seemed to provoke him, and he suddenly swerved toward a nearby plaza. As I accelerated and blocked his path, a fleeting thought crossed my mind. Of that movie I never finished. I would probably never know how it ended. That spring, I took time off from school to visit my mother in the hospital. The room was quiet, and she was still asleep. I moved to the other side of the room to sit and read when I noticed a plate of neatly sliced fruit on the bedside table. Next to it was a pure white paper crane. Before I could think much of it, my mother woke up. Her gentle smile brightened the room as she said, "Claire folded this for me."